New Testament in Ancient Greek for Absolute Beginners. My name is Helena Stay, and I'm your guide as we read through the New Testament in its original, beautiful language, the language of ancient Greece, which coincidentally was called Helena Stay. Because each lesson will build on previous lessons, be sure to start with Lesson 1. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you feel so led. All right, today we're going to cover Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 34, which cover the cost of following Jesus, the occasion when Jesus stills the storm, and the occasion when Jesus casts the demons into pigs. And the topics that we'll be covering are a review of definite articles, prepositions including περί and eîmι, and a few others, personal pronouns, a review of heis, mia, hen, which means one, review of cases, the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and vocative. We're also going to go over the verb forms of echo, which means I have, and eîmι, which means I am. And we'll also cover the imperative and infinitive moods and show you their forms. And finally, we'll talk about the adjective mega, which means great, large, or loud. Let's go ahead and get started. Idonde ha Jesus palus aklan periauton ekelusen apelthein eis ta peiran. Kai proselthon heis grammateus epinauto didaskale akalutheso soi hapu eon aperke. Kai lege auto ha Jesus. Hai allo pekes foleus ekusin. Kai ta petena tu uranu kataskenoses. Hade huias tu anthropu uk eke pu ten kephalein kline. All right, the first thing that we're going to do is point out our definite articles, which we haven't covered in quite some time. You're probably familiar with seeing them, but I just wanted to remind you of their forms, which of course change depending on whether you're talking about masculine, feminine, or neuter, or whether it's a singular or plural object or objects. And then, of course, the part they play in the sentence. So our nominatives are the subjects, ha Jesus. And interestingly, in ancient Greek, they use the article for proper nouns like names, places, and people. So ha Jesus, the Jesus, not just any Jesus, the Jesus. It's kind of actually makes sense because it's a definite article. It points to a specific thing, a specific person named Jesus. And then here we have the other side. So in this case, it's accusative. But because it's a neuter, here it's N is for neuter, accusative, neuter, singular, it's the same as the nominative. So notice, remember in neuter, you have the same form for nominative and accusative in singular, and then nominative and accusative in plural are also the same, ta, ta. All right, so eis ta peiran. And then ha Jesus again is the subject. Foxes is feminine, and it's nominative here. Foxes have holes. That's the subject. So here we have high, right? So we have high over here. And notice rough breathing mark. Just as it's ha, we have high. And also feminine singular is hey. So it doesn't, obviously, you don't have a rough breathing mark or a smooth breathing mark with a neuter because it starts with a consonant. All right, let's look at the next one. So hai allo pekes. Kai ta petena. Birds are neuter. So here we have ta, neuter nominative, because birds have nests. The birds of the air. So instead of just saying of air, you have to say of the. So two is masculine here. So it could be masculine or neuter. But since this is masculine, you use two. If it was a neuter noun that followed, it would also be two. And it would be tes if it was feminine. All right, tu uranu, of the air, have nests, or you don't even have to say the nests because it's just nests, right? But ha huias tu anthropu, the son of the man. So ha huias tu anthropu. And then doesn't have a place where he may lay his head. Now in English, we would say tein kephalein autou, or autes, excuse me, because this is feminine. But in Greek, you don't really need to say the his. It's just understood that it's the subject's head. He doesn't have a place to lay his head down. So that's tein. And that is accusative feminine because he's following this he may lay, where he may lay. This is the direct objects of he may lay, he might lay. So accusative feminine singular, tein. All right, so that's just a quick review. Of course, there's all these other forms, but they don't occur in this sentence, but you'll see them. Just remember ha, he, ta, tu, tes, tu, to, te, to, ton, tain, ta, hoi, hi, ta, tone, 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 tois, tais, tois, tus, tas, ta. Next, we're going to go to prepositions. And in these verses, we only see two. We see περί, which means around, and then it's followed by accusative in this form of meaning, around him. We'll see that περί can also mean concerning, and in that case, it would be followed by the genitive. Here we have the accusative masculine, third person singular, personal pronoun, auton, περί auton. And then they departed, he commanded them to depart. We're going to talk about this later. It's an infinitive, but to the other side. Eis ta peiron. Eis ta peiron. So eis is one of those very helpful prepositions that's always followed by the accusative. And I always think of ace in the hole. So ace in the hole is followed by accusative because it's an A. So that's kind of a helpful thing for me. But I'm going to show you this chart, which I'll bring up every time we talk about prepositions. Here we have all of the most common prepositions here, and then what they mean when followed by the genitive, when followed by the dative, and followed by the accusative. So we earlier saw ace, and that is only going to be followed by the accusative. That doesn't ever occur with genitive or dative. So that's very helpful. We also saw περί, which in the genitive, when it followed by the genitive, it means concerning or about whatever it follows or whatever follows it. And then with the accusative, it means around. So they were around him. So I always think that accusative generally, if there's a difference, it will be something about place, like huper is above, hupa is under. Whereas genitive is more abstract. So on behalf of, huper would be on behalf of the sake of somebody else, or by. Whereas this is more something in the physical universe, above or below. Around, you can think of somebody coming around someone in physical space. So that's why accusative is more. Para usually is from or with or beside with the dative. But beside, like if someone's physically next to you, you can think of that as when the accusative would be used. So that's just a general way of thinking about it, but it's not always the case. So I just want to kind of give you that caveat. I wish it was hard and fast rule, but it's not always. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Next, let's talk about the personal pronouns. We have Jesus saw a great crowd around him, περί auton. So this is the personal pronoun that's accusative, masculine, third person singular. So the nominative is autos, and then it's autou, auto, and auton. All right, and then down here, and having come to him, one scribe said to him, epen auto. And here, to or for is generally the dative use. So that's auto, auto. This little thing is the iota subscript, and remember this is a circumflex accent. And then you, I will follow, akalutheso, soy. So this is one of those verbs, akalutheo, that is followed by a dative because it's like following to someone. As opposed to in English, it would not be considered dative. We wouldn't say I follow to you, but we just say I follow you. So akalutheo is going to take the dative, which is soy, soy. And then he says to him, again, we have auto. All right, so this is just a very brief review. I wanted to put up this overview of all the different personal pronouns just because it's good to remind ourselves. I'm going to say them really quickly just so you remember. Ego, su, autos, aute, auta. Emu or mu, su, autu, autes, autu. Emoi or moi, or soy or so. Auto, aute, auto. Eme or just me, se, auton, autain, auta. Hemes, humes, autoi, autai, auta. Hemon, humon, auton, auton, auton. Hemin, humin, autois, autais, autois. Hemas, humas, autus, autas, auta. Our next subject is a review of heis, notice the rough breathing mark, heis mia hen, which is the word for one. Unfortunately, there's no plural, so we only have to look at the singular form. So it's heis mia hen, henas, mias, henas. Heni, mia, heni. Henna, mian, hen. So notice the neuter, nominative, and accusative are the same, and the masculine and neuter are the same in the genitive and in the dative. All right, so here we see, and having come to him, one scribe, heis grammateus, and we have a nominative, masculine, singular noun, scribe. So it's going to take the nominative masculine, and it's always singular, of course, because it's one. Next, I want to talk about the cases and just review them really quick. We've already talked about them slightly in the cases of definite articles and personal pronouns. But in these 3 verses, we have an example of each. So first we have ha Jesus, which is the subject. So we know it's nominative, masculine, singular in this case. So nominative. And then next, a genitive we have down here, the birds of the air. And this also can mean heavens, like the kingdom of heavens is kingdom of God. So uranu, and generally you'll recognize this u ending, or in the plural, it's generally own with the omega nu. So uranu, of the air, and that's key for genitive. It's generally something belonging to something else, or deriving from something else, or coming out of or from something else. All right, and then accusative, we have here, he saw, having seen, a great crowd. So this is the object of what Jesus saw. So it's an accusative. And in this case, it's masculine singular. Generally, you're going to have an ending of a nu, right? Except for the plural, own is also ends with a nu. But the nu is generally a sign of that accusative. And then dative, we've already talked about, but when I follow you, I'll follow you wherever you go, is a dative. So a lot of times you'll see this oi. You'll also see what's called the iota subscript a lot. And then also with feminine, you'll see the iota subscript with the eta. So that's another sign of the dative, is look for that iota subscript. Not always the case, but you can see this iota here becomes that little subscript in certain forms. And then finally, the vocative case. Now the nominative would be didaskalos. So here is a sign of the vocative. And there's the V for vocative, masculine, singular. And that's not as common. We usually don't talk about vocative when I give you all the forms. So that's why I wanted to point it out here. Next, I want to review echo. I believe we've covered this already. So it's probably review, but I'm just going to be basically teaching new things very rarely and just mainly reviewing things. So I'll introduce very little in each lesson, but mainly review. And that way, over time, you're going to learn it really well, hopefully. But here is our present indicative active form of I have. So echo, echo. And if you actually pronounce this correctly, it's like the sound of loch in the Scottish loch, L-O-C-H. So echo. I actually prefer just saying echo because it's a little easier. It's not as hard on the throat. So I'm just going to say it that way. So echo, I have, ekes, eke, ekomen, ekete, ekusin. All right, so we see that here, foxes have holes. And now foxes is plural, so we're talking about third person plural. So that it's going to be this word, ekkusin, ekkusin. And then down here, the Son of Man has no place or doesn't have a place. Here we have eke, right? So, but it's following uk. So that means doesn't. Now just remember, I'm going to say this again just to make sure you remember, u is what is normally used before a consonant. And then when there's a vowel, it becomes either uk or uch. This is when it's a smooth vowel afterwards. In this case, we have eke, or uch when you have rough. And that kind of makes sense because when you have a h sound, the k, kappa, combined with like a rough sound would make more of this. I really don't like making that sound, but a lot of languages have that sound, like German and Dutch and Scottish. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Matthew 8, verses 21 and 22. Heteros de ton matheton autou, apin auto, kurie, epitrepson moi, proton apelthein, kai thopsai, ton patera mu, hade Jesus lege auto, akaluthe moi, kai office tous necrus, thopsai tous heauton necrus. All right, this is a good opportunity for us to talk about the imperative mood. Remember, this is the one that's signaled by the M, right? So I was already taken by imperfect. So M is for imperative. All right, and that means you're basically telling somebody to do something. You can also be telling a third party to do something, which is an interesting aspect of Greek. We don't have an example of that here, but I will point it out once we do. But here we have epitrepson. Allow me first to go bury my father, right? Epitrepson. This is from the lexical form epitrepo, and that means I entrust, permit, or allow. So he's basically, first allow me, give me permission. Epitrepson. Now you're probably wondering why that psi here. So the pi is going to be added to a sigma because when you form this aorist form of the imperative, it becomes psi. So pi plus psi, and that makes sense. Like psychology, we have the same kind of leftover, but ps had its own letter in Greek. So it was nice. Instead of having the pi and the sigma, you just changed it to the psi. So epitrepson moi. Here we have akalutheo, and that means I follow. So another imperative is follow me, akaluthe moi. Here we have the ending a, and that's an indication that this is a present imperative. Now, present and aorist imperatives don't always differ when it comes to the time. Like allow me, follow me, are pretty much he wants that to happen. But present often is used for something that's a general command. Follow me, not just right now, but always. There's always exceptions, of course, especially in ancient Greek, but usually you use the aorist for something that's quick, like, oh, grab me that soda, that kind of thing, something quick. And then leave, here's another aorist. In this case, we end with S, right? And that's because this is an irregular verb. It doesn't have the son that usually you have a son ending for your aorist imperatives, second person singular. So this is from the verb eîmι. When you see the me on the end of the verb, that's an indication that it's what's called a me verb, understandably. And the me verbs are very irregular. They're kind of even more ancient form of Greek that's kind of continued, that hadn't completely gone away. So we'll talk about those in the future, but just suffice it to say that leave, second person singular, of eîmι is office. All right, now I'm going to show you the forms for the imperative, but I don't want them to scare you. I want you to recognize that over time you're going to start recognizing them. Here we have the second person singular present active imperative, and it's just with e at the end. Okay, epsilon. And then the plural is the same as in your present active indicative. It's just the ete, luete. So you wouldn't be able to tell if somebody, you don't have to tell by context if they're saying, you are loosing, as opposed to loose the horse right now. All right. Now, if you want to say the slave must be loosed, you would just say lueto. That should be an accent there. Sorry, there's some errors here. Lueto. And then to let them loose, the slaves, let the slaves loose, or let the slaves go. In English, it's almost like you're telling somebody to do it. But in Greek, there's a form that's just for third person plural and third person singular. So basically, it's a command to a third party. So be loosed, or loose yourselves, or something like that. Lueto-san. Notice here, this ends, you just add the san. Lueto, lueto-san. And now we have a middle deponent. So remember, there's some verbs that are always in the middle, like per you am I, which means I go. And some verbs, it's to oneself if you use that form. So be loosed, luon. And here you see the on ending, which will transition over to the aorist. And then in the third, we'll just kind of change this. Notice that in this case, the tau becomes a sigma theta here. So luete becomes lueste. So you add a sigma and a theta, lueste. And that sounds better than lueste. The Greeks didn't like that combination of words. So usually after the sigma, the tau will change into a theta, lueste. And then here we have luesto, which notice the tau becomes the sigma theta again. Lueto, luesto. Again, this should be this accented. And then luesto-san, we add the san again, right? So you'll start recognizing these. The more you see them, the more it'll become clear to you that it's an imperative. But fortunately, Bible Hub gives us a little clue with that M. Now we have the exact same forms, except now we have, instead of on, we have san with the imperative, loose. Okay, now again, whether you use this loose, lue, or looson, really depends on the context. Generally, the present is a general command, whereas the aorist is kind of a quick one. Right now, I want you to do this. And then instead of luete, it's lucete. Notice there's a sigma. So you basically just are adding the sigma to make it more of a quick command. And then lusato, notice we add the sigma and this epsilon becomes an alpha. So lusato and lusato-san. So the san is added. Everything stays the same. You just add the san to make it plural. All right. Now we're going to talk about aorist passive or deponent. So when you're using it as a passive, like be loosed, you add this theta eta. So it's lutheti. You can see a little better. Lutheti. And it's, by the way, you add T instead of, there's no E. So lutheti, it'll sound more familiar. And then it becomes luthete. Basically, you just have this iota changed to an epsilon in the plural. So talking to one person, be loosed, lutheti. Talking to more than one person, be loosed, luthete. And then lutheto. Notice we still have this toe, but we have the. Lutheto instead of lueto, lutheto. So be loosed. And we've talked a little bit before about how this theta often indicates passive. So let him or her be loosed. You're talking to maybe your soldier, a centurion's talking to a soldier saying about the prisoner, loose him. That would be lutheto. And then if they're talking about multiple prisoners that should be loosed, you would say lutheto-san. And again, if you know lutheto, you just add san. Very nice. I love the consistency here. That's not always the case in Greek. All right. And then we have some of these verbs. In this case, it's por you am I. Let me write it out here. And these verbs are always in the middle. Por you o my. And that's boom. Por you am I means I go. And it's usually words that are of motion, but also talking when you're talking back and forth with someone, answering, saying. But por you am I is our example here. So I go is por you am I, and por you sai is just go. And por you saste means go to multiple people. And then por you sas, though, notice it's similar. It's got that theta omega. at the end, just like you have here, luestho, poiusastho is let him or her go, and let them go would be poiusasthosan. Again, we have that san at the end. All right, so of course, I'm not going to require you to memorize this. There are no tests. I just want you to be familiar. Now let's talk about the infinitive mood. Here we see this person asks Jesus, allow me first to go. So allow me to go. This is exactly how we use it in English. So apelthein is the object of the verb allow. So it's kind of like a noun here, allow me to go. And this is what's called a complementary infinitive. It complements another verb, meaning it finishes the thought. And so you have allow me what? Allow me to do what? Apelthein, to go. This is from aperkamai, by the way. This means I go away. This is the second aorist form, which is an irregular form. So it has this interesting apel at the beginning. If it were just erkamai, it would start with just elf. So we see a lot of that, but apel. And then thein, this is the part that has the infinitive ending. We'll talk about that more soon. And then we have two different uses of the infinitive for bury. Thopto is I bury my father. All right, so this is I would think this is a good request. What is more important than if your father dies, going and making sure that he's buried properly? So Jesus is emphasizing here that even the most important things in your life are never as important as following me. Of course, he wants us to bury our family. That's not the point. The point is following him is super, super important. And this is his way of emphasizing that. So thopsai, so allow me to go. And this is part of the complementary and to bury, thopsai. And then here, Jesus says, let the dead bury their own dead. So basically, it's not important during this life to do anything except follow me. All right, so let's look at these forms over here. You have two different types of infinitives, present infinitives and aorist infinitives. And this is first aorist, indicating this is not the irregular form of the aorist. All right, so first aorist is kind of a clue of saying this is the regular forms. There are irregular forms called second aorist. We'll talk about those another time. All right, so ein here, epsilon, iota, nu, is your usual ending for the present active. Now this is a second aorist. Second aorist is irregular. It has these weird stems, apel instead of aper, whatever. The second aorist is also going to take the present tense endings, even if it's aorist. Super confusing. So don't worry about that ein. But if you see something like luein, that's present. Middle would be to be loosed, luesthai. Notice we have this theta for a passive form and another theta for deponent, which is when a deponent verb is the same as middle only. I should explain in this chart here. Deponent is the same as middle only. Like poor you am I, only is in the middle form. So that would be called deponent verb. A lot of people don't use the term deponent. They just use the term middle only. But I just want you to be aware of when you're talking about deponent verbs, those are the middle only verbs we've always talked about. And basically all you do is add the same ending. Por you esthai. Luesthai, por you esthai. So that's actually pretty cute, pretty easy for the passive. And then the active is always ein in the present. Except for second aorist verbs. They use the ein for their aorist form. All right, and now first aorist, meaning the non-irregular, the regular aorists, have this sigma and then I. And that's what we see over here. So the thopto is basically, you're taking thop, toe, and you're adding a sigma, alpha, iota. Here with thopto, it changes from the pi, tau, sigma, all together become the psi. Interesting. So that's another form that will change when you have a sigma added on. It's just not a good sound for ancient Greeks. They didn't like thopsai. Whenever you have a tau and a sigma next to each other, they wanted to get rid of it. So it becomes thopsai, thopsai. So thopsai is an example of a first aorist infinitive using the I ending with a sigma. And then middle would be loosasthai, to loose oneself. And then we have luthenai, and then poryusasthai, poryuthenai. All right, so don't worry. This is super confusing, but I don't want you to worry. I just want you to recognize that there are forms. One of the reasons we're going through the whole New Testament is because over time you'll start recognizing these. Kai embanti auto eis ta ploion e kaluthesan auto hoi mathetai autu. Kai idu seismos megas egeneto en te thalase. Hoste ta ploion kaluptesthai. Hupaton kumaton. Autaste e kathuden kai proselthontes egeron auton. Legontes kurie soson apalumetha kai lege autois ti deloi este aligapistoi tate egerthes epetimesen tois anemois kai te thalase kai egenito galene megale hoide anthropoi ethaumasan legontes podapas estin hutas hati kai hoi anemoi kai he thalasa auto hupaku usin. All right, let's look at this imperative form we see here. Soson, soson. This comes from the lexical form sozo, I save. And notice for some reason it has a little iota subscript there. So sozo, this iota subscript goes away at this point when it becomes a longer omega. So sozo is our lexical form, and this is an aorist. So we look here and you can see why it becomes soson. Now here we have so-so, and then you change the ending, you take off the omega, and you change the ending to son. Now, when you have a zeta plus a sigma, this is going to become just a sigma. All right, it's kind of like you soften the zeta. It goes from z, sozo, to s, the two together. So basically you're left with sigma, omega, sigma, omicron, nu, and it's long. Soson, soson. So this happens a lot in Greek where you have a combination of letters becoming another letter. And a lot of times it had to do with the way it sounds. And that made sense because most of the time people were speaking, they weren't writing. A lot of people didn't know how to write and read. So it's just how it sounds. It sounds much better if you combine these together just to make the sigma. And it also emphasizes that it's an aorist, because otherwise if it stayed z, it would be a little bit more difficult to tell. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Not too much time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these forms again. All right, here I want to point out this adjective, megas, megas. It is masculine nominative singular, so NMS here. And down here we have nominative feminine singular, so megale, megale, because calm is a feminine noun. And up here, storm, seismos, which you might recognize from how we get seismology, is masculine. So we have megas, megale, mega is the neuter. And then megalu, megales. This would be megalu again, but we don't have a neuter use of the genitive singular mega in the Bible. These dashes mean they're just not in the New Testament. Of course, it existed in ancient Greek. Again, megalo with this iota subscript was for the dative masculine. And then megale, this should have iota subscript. Accusative megan, megalen, mega. And remember, mega, it stays the same if it's neuter in nominative and accusative. Megalon, and they don't have a feminine genitive plural or a neuter genitive plural in the New Testament. And then megalais, to the great things. And this is in the New Testament with voices, which is a feminine plural. And then megalus, that's when it's used as loud. Can also mean loud, so loud voices. Megalus is the accusative masculine plural, and megala is your neuter, not accusative plural. All right, I'm just going to take this opportunity to talk about the verb eîmι. Eîmι is the verb for to be, or I am. I have one example of the use of eîmι in these verses, and of course I'm going to take advantage. Here Jesus asks, "Why are you fearful, you of little faith?" So here is second person plural of the present indicative active. So you'll see it right here. Este, you all are. All right, so let's go ahead and read these so you're familiar. As we go through, you're going to see a lot of these forms. Of course, don't need to memorize. That's one benefit of listening to my videos instead of taking a class. So we have eîmι is I am. Esmen, we are. You are. Este, you all are. Estin, he, she, or it is. And esin, they are. Then we have the future tense, which has middle endings. All right, so even though I call it active voice, sometimes it's called the middle voice, but sometimes verbs in Greek take the middle in the future. Interesting enough. I'm not sure why, but they do. So I will be, esomai. So you'll recognize poiuomai, I go, the same endings, but in this case it's future. But the sigma here also helps to know that it's future, because sigmas are generally, you would add a sigma to give people an idea you're talking about something in the future. So esomai, I will be. Esametha, we will be. Esse, you will be. Perhaps you will be writing an essay. That's how I remember it. Esseste, you all will be. Estai, he, she, or it will be. Essantai, they will be. All right, and now let's talk about the imperfect tense. Now, there is no aorist tense of eîmι because the idea of being or to be is not something that happens in a particular moment in time. It's generally an ongoing thing. So that's the way I remember it. So usually we'll use this imperfect tense when you're talking about the past. So we have aimein, I was. Amen, or aimetha, as we were. Amen, aimetha. Ace, or aistha, is you were, singular. Ate is you all were. Ain, he or she or it was. And asan is they were. All right, so we're going to see some of these. Actually, we'll see ain coming up here, and we'll see asin coming up here. So I just wanted to review those now before we move any further forward. Now we're going to read Matthew 8, verses 28 through 30. Kai elfontos autou eis ta peiron, eis tein koron ton gadare non, hupein tesan auto, dua daimonizomenoi, ekton menemeon, exerchamenoi, kalepoi leon. Hoste me iskuein tina parelthein dia tes adu ekenes. Kai idu ekraxen legantes ti hemin kai soi huia tu theu. Eophes hode prakairu basanisai hemas. Einde makran apauton agele koiron palon baskamene. Prepositions. Here we have ace again, which is super common, but we have a lot of other things too. Just remember ace always is followed by the accusative. All right. Next we have ek, out of, and as you would imagine, ek is followed by the genitive, out of the tombs, And then no one was able to pass by that way. So in this case, by is followed by the genitive. And then we have down here, pra, before. Have you come here before the time to torment us? But before the time, here is genitive. And then finally, from them is genitive. So there was far from them a herd of pigs. So from them is meaning away from. And again, here is our chart. So let's start with apa. Apa is always going to be with the genitive. Dia is going to either be through with the genitive, so through that way, or by that way, through that road, is what we have in our current situation. And with the accusative, it's because of, because of. We also have ace, which is always accusative, meaning unto, into, to, and in. We had ek, out of or from, that's always with genitive. So this pra isn't included in our chart, but in this case, before the time would be with genitive. All right, let's talk about the infinitive mood again, your favorite. I put up the forms here so we can kind of compare what we have here. Here we have a present infinitive active voice. So no one was able, or not one person was able, iskuein. This comes from the lexical form iskuo, I am strong, or I am strong enough, I have the power. So no one had the power to pass by. Now here we have two infinitives in a row. So in English we translate this as no one was able, but actually in ancient Greek the form that you're using is a negative me used with the infinitive form of iskuo. So that means so that, not to be able to pass is basically the literal translation. But we would make it sound a little better with saying no one was able. All right, so iskuein is regular. You basically just take off the omega here and replace it with ein, right? So we love seeing those regular verbs that do things the way we'd expect them to do. And then par elthein is an aorist, but this is from par erkamai, which is a second aorist, going to be a second aorist verb that starts with the interesting root of par el. Okay, so erkamai. It uses the present endings when it's a second aorist, even though it's the aorist tense here. All right, and then back down here we have you come to torment us? And again, this is a complementary infinitive. You have come to torment. So you've come to do what? To torment. All right, so basanisai. And again, aorist here. Now, basaniso ends with omega. Now we're going to add a sigma, right? And an alpha and an iota. But the sigma and the zeta combined just makes one sigma. So it becomes basanisai. So that's instead of having the zeta and the sigma together, you just have a single sigma, right? To torment us. And we have an example here of our accusative first person plural personal pronoun, which of course I had to point out to you before we move on. All right, let's go ahead and read the last part of our chapter. Hoide daimones parekalun auton legantes, ekbales hemas, apostelon hemas, estein agelen ton koiron, kai epenautois, hupagete, hoide exelthantes, apelthon, es tus koirus, kai idu ornesen passa he agele, kata tu kremnu, estein thalasan, kai apethanon, entois hudasin, hoide baskantes effugan, kai apelthantes estein pollen, apengelan, panta, kai taton daimonisamenon, kai idu passa he palis ex eilthen, es hupantesen to Jesu, kai idantes auton parekalesan hapos metabe, apaton harion auton. Let's first talk about the prepositions that are in these verses. Ace, we're familiar with, followed by the accusative. Again, ace, and again, ace here, here, and here. So we have 5 in one section here. So into the herd, into the pigs, into the sea, and into the city, and went out to meet. In order to is basically the meaning here. All right, so we have accusative after all of those. Then we have kata, which means down, and in this case, it's followed by the genitive, the steep bank, and then in the waters, en tois hudasin. And this is followed by the dative. I usually remember this by if you're in a relationship with someone, you're dating them. So that's how I remember the dative is for following en. And then the last one down here is apa, from the region. And apa is always followed by the genitive. So out of, from, of. And just a quick review, apa is always with the genitive. In this case, ace is always, and then we have ace, which is always unto, into, to, which is always with the accusative. We also have en in these verses, which is always with the dative. And then kata, in this case, it was against or down this steep slope, but sometimes it means according to, like the Gospels according to Matthew, that would use kata. All right, now let's look at the imperative. There's one imperative here, hupagete, and this is from hupago. Now, ago by itself, without hup, means I lead. So hupago means I lead or bring under, or I lead on slowly, or I depart. All right, so hupagete. Here we have simply just added ete to the end. So you take hupo, hupago, and then just add ete. And you keep your accent in the same place. Hupagete, hupagete. So that's one of the simpler ways, and that would actually be the exact same as the present indicative active. It's just from context that you know it's the imperative second person plural. That brings us to the end of lesson 19. Thank you again for sticking with this for so long. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Please remember to like this video, and if you haven't subscribed yet, of course, I'd be surprised if you haven't subscribed yet and you're at the end of lesson 19. But if you haven't, please do. We really appreciate it. And